I grew up in Northern California, which is another way of saying I was raised between salt water and redwoods. My younger brother Danny and I were the kind of Californians people from other states joke about. We surfed before school when the swell was right. We smoked bud in the back of busted vans with boards strapped to the roof. We camped under pines so tall they made churches look like cheap sheds. We knew which beaches were good in winter, which creeks stayed cold in August, and which county roads cops didn't bother patrolling after midnight. I loved all of it. Still do, I guess. The mellow Cali rhythm, the easy mornings, the long drives, the smell of eucalyptus and coffee, the belief that life could be lived slowly if you just refused to run. But I also respected work. My dad ran a machine shop in Reading and raised us on the American dream without ever using the phrase, like a politician might, when running for office. To him, it meant showing up, keeping your word, paying your debts, building something that didn't fall apart after the first hard season. Danny didn't care much for that part. He was all soul, no anchor. When he was 15, he found a beat-up copy of Charles Bukowski at a used bookstore and decided almost immediately that the only honest life was one spent exploring every dark hallway of the body and spirit. He drank too young, loved too hard, wandered too far, and spoke about suffering like it was a passport stamp. "Comfort makes ghosts out of people," he told me once. I laughed at him then. I don't anymore. 2 years ago, Danny drove up toward Mount Shasta for one of his usual camping and self-discovery trips. He said he was going to hike, eat some mushrooms, and listen to what the mountain had to say. That was Danny, always half joking, half praying. He texted me a picture from a gas station parking lot outside Weed, California. He was grinning, sunburned, hair in his eyes, holding up a bag of trail mix like it was a trophy. "Last civilized meal, bro," he wrote. I replied, "Don't get eaten by Bigfoot." He sent back, "Bigfoot respects seekers." That was the last thing I heard from him for 22 months. When he didn't come back, after 4 days, my mom called me, crying. At first I wasn't scared, not really. Danny had disappeared before. He'd lose service, meet some people, follow some stupid impulse down the coast, and resurface with a story about sleeping in a lifeguard tower or helping a stranger build a sweat lodge. But by day 6, search and rescue was involved. They found his tent. They found his sleeping bag, his little camp stove, his journal, 1 boot, and a half-empty bottle of water. His backpack was gone. So was Danny. The official theory was simple. He'd taken shrooms, wandered off trail, gotten lost, and died somewhere on the mountain where nobody could find him. Maybe he fell into a ravine. Maybe exposure got him. Maybe an animal dragged what was left into the brush. My mother refused to believe it for almost a year. My father believed it immediately. I didn't know what I believed. I only knew that every time the wind moved through the pines, I heard my brother laughing somewhere I couldn't reach. Then, 22 months after Danny vanished, he walked up the driveway of my parents' house at 3:17 in the morning and rang the doorbell. My mom opened the door. She screamed so loud the neighbors called the police. Danny stood there barefoot, filthy, and shivering in an old flannel shirt that had rotted at the cuffs. His beard was wild. His hair hung to his shoulders. He looked thinner, but not 22 months thinner. More like someone who had missed a couple meals and 1 good night's sleep. The strangest part was his face. He looked annoyed, confused, like we had interrupted him. When my mother grabbed him and started sobbing, Danny kept saying, "Mom, what the hell? What's wrong? I was only gone for one night." One night, that's what he said. The police came, then doctors, then reporters, briefly, until my father threatened to start swinging at cameras. Danny told the same story every time. He had hiked about 3/4 of the way up Shasta. His plan was to reach a high spot before sunset, eat the mushrooms, and watch the stars come out. But the weather turned strange. Not bad exactly, just strange. The air got too quiet, he told me. We were sitting in my parents' kitchen 3 days after he came back. He hadn't slept more than 20 minutes at a time. Every time he nodded off, he snapped awake, gasping. "What do you mean?" I asked. "You know how forests are never really quiet?" he said. "There's always bugs, birds, wind, something moving. But it all stopped, like somebody put a glass bowl over the mountain." He found a cave around dusk. "Not huge," he said. "Just a black split in the rock behind a curtain of manzanita branches." He hadn't noticed it until he heard someone humming from inside. That was when he saw her. A little old woman standing at the cave mouth. Danny said she was tiny, barely up to his chest, with long gray hair and a face so wrinkled it looked carved from wet bark. She wore a dress made of some dark, heavy fabric, though he couldn't understand how she wasn't freezing. "She asked if I was lost," he said. "Were you?" "No, not then." He said her voice was kind, almost grandmotherly. She told him the weather would turn before nightfall and invited him inside to warm himself. Danny, being Danny, followed her. The cave was bigger inside than it should have been. He was certain of that. The entrance looked shallow from outside, but past the first bend it opened into a chamber, tall enough to stand in. There was a fire burning without smoke. Iron pots hung above it. Strange bundles of herbs dangled from the stone ceiling. The walls were covered in scratches, little marks like tally lines, thousands of them. "She kept asking me questions," Danny said. "What kind of questions?" He rubbed both hands over his face. Where was I from? Did I come alone? Did my people live near the water or under trees? Did we still bury our dead in boxes? Did children in my town dream deeply? I didn't say anything. "She asked about kids a lot," he continued. "If I knew any lonely ones, any angry ones, any who felt unwanted. She said children like that did well in the cave." A cold pressure formed behind my ribs. "She offered me stew," he said. "Kept insisting. Said I must be hungry from climbing." "Did you eat any?" Danny looked at me then, and for a second his eyes were not my brother's eyes. They were too wide, too wet. "No," he whispered. "Thank God." The old woman turned her back to stir the pot. That was when Danny saw what she had been standing in front of. A smaller passage at the rear of the cave, and inside it, just beyond the firelight, were children. Not moving, not speaking, just standing there in the dark. He said there were maybe 12 of them, maybe more. Their eyes reflected the fire like animals' eyes. Their mouths hung open a little, as if they were listening to something too faint for him to hear. One of them lifted a hand and waved. Danny ran. He bolted out of the cave, tearing his jacket on the rock, expecting the woman to grab him. She didn't. She only screamed after him. Not words. A long, splitting shriek that rose and rose until it became several voices at once. Outside, the mountain had changed. The moon was enormous. bigger than he had ever seen it, bloated and bluish, hanging low over the black trees. The stars looked wrong, too many of them. Some arranged in patterns he couldn't recognize, others moving slowly, like sparks drifting underwater. Then the drums started. From below him, from above him, from inside the mountain. Boom, boom, boom. He ran downhill for hours, though he swore it only felt like minutes. The woman's scream followed him through the trees. Sometimes it came from far behind, sometimes from right beside his ear. Once, he looked back and saw her at the edge of the trail, moving between the trunks without walking, just sliding. The next thing he remembered, he was at my parents' driveway, barefoot and cold, with his mushrooms still in his pocket. Fresh, not dried out, not rotten. Fresh as the day he left. We didn't know what to do with that detail. Nobody did. The doctors called it trauma. The police called it impossible. My mother called it a miracle. My father said nothing at all. For a while, I thought maybe Danny would recover. He stopped talking about the cave. He gained weight. He cut his hair. He even came surfing with me once down near Santa Cruz, though he spent most of the morning staring at the horizon. Then the children started showing up. The first was a girl in a yellow raincoat, standing across the street from my parents' house at dusk. My mother saw her through the kitchen window. When she opened the front door, the girl turned and walked behind a parked car. There was nowhere for her to go. She vanished anyway. A week later, Danny called me at 2 a.m. "She found me," he said. I sat up in bed. "Who?" He was crying. "The woman. She says I was rude." Behind his voice, faint but steady, I heard drums. Boom, boom, boom. I drove to his apartment so fast I don't remember half the trip. His door was unlocked. Every light was on. Danny sat in the corner of his bedroom with a kitchen knife across his knees, staring at his closet. The closet door was open 3 inches. From inside came a smell like wet stone and boiled meat. I wanted to be brave. I wanted to be the older brother, the practical one, the one who believed in hard work and locks and cops and doctors. Instead, I whispered, "Danny." The closet door creaked wider. A small hand appeared around the edge. Gray fingers, child-sized. Danny began to laugh. Not because it was funny, because some part of him had broken in exactly the right shape to let the fear out that way. A little boy stepped from the closet. His clothes were old. Not old like thrift store old. Old like buried in a box old. His eyes shone orange in the bedroom light. He looked at Danny, then at me. "Do you know any lonely children?" he asked. I ran. God help me, I ran. I dragged Danny with me by the collar, and we stumbled down the stairs into the parking lot. Behind us, from the open apartment window, the boy screamed with the voice of an old woman. "Danny lives with me now. I don't let him sleep alone. I don't let him close doors. I don't let him go near mountains. But some nights, around 3:17 in the morning, he sits straight up in bed and starts answering questions in his sleep. Where are you from? Do your people live near water? Do children still dream deeply?" And sometimes, when the fog rolls in from the coast and turns the moon big and blue, I hear drums under the floorboards. Boom, boom, boom. Last night, Danny woke me by standing beside my bed. He was smiling. Not his old smile. Not the stoned, sunlit grin from beach mornings and gas station selfies. This smile was small and polite, like an old woman's. "She says you can come too," he whispered. "She says brothers do well in the cave." Then he opened his hand. In his palm lay a mushroom, fresh as the day he left. I used to love the outdoors. I mean, really love it. Not in the way people online say they love nature, because they went camping once and posted filtered pictures beside a lake. I'm talking about the kind of love where being outside felt more natural than being inside, where the smell of wet dirt and pine needles hit something deep in your chest, where the sound of wind through aspens could calm you down, better than any therapy session ever could. I grew up in Colorado, and if you've ever been here, you know what I mean. This state spoils you. Mountains that look fake at sunrise, endless woodland trails, rivers cold enough to sting your bones, places where you can stand for 10 straight minutes and hear absolutely nothing except your own breathing. Back then, my happy place was deep in the woods. Sometimes it was hiking. Sometimes it was taking my ATV down muddy back trails, so isolated you could swear you were the last person alive. I loved waking up before dawn, throwing coffee into a thermos and driving out while the rest of the world slept. No phone calls, no emails, no notifications. Just trees, dirt, silence, and me. Now my happy place is here, online, Reddit, Discord, YouTube rabbit holes at 3 in the morning. People tell me all the time to go touch grass. I always laugh at that one, because I tried touching grass once, and it nearly killed me. It happened 2 years ago now. I still remember every detail with disgusting clarity, like my brain decided that morning deserved permanent high-definition storage. It was late summer, one of those Colorado mornings where the air is cool enough to wake you up instantly, but the sunlight already promises heat later in the day. I woke up at 4 a.m., same as always. Grabbed my keys, pulled on my running shoes, and drove out toward one of the trail systems about an hour from my apartment. Nothing extreme. I wasn't climbing 14ers or anything. Just a peaceful jog through woodland trails I'd been visiting for years. Honestly, it was perfect that morning. Bright sunshine filtered through, a soft layer of mist hanging low between the trees. The kind of scene photographers kill for. Everything glowed gold and silver at the same time. Pine trees dripping with dew, mud dark from overnight moisture. The world felt clean. But there was something else, too. Quiet. Too quiet. At the time, I barely noticed it. Looking back, it should have been the first warning. Normally, those trails are alive in the mornings. Birds screaming at each other. Squirrels tearing through branches. Rustling everywhere. But that day the woods felt paused, like nature itself was holding its breath. I parked my car, stretched for a minute, put my earbuds in, and started jogging. About half a mile into the trail, that feeling hit me. You know the one. That sudden cold wash over your body when your instincts detect something before your brain catches up. Every hair on my arms stood straight up. My stomach tightened. It felt exactly like being watched. I slowed down immediately and pulled my earbuds out. Nothing, just mist drifting through the trees. I stood there listening, trying to convince myself I was being paranoid. But then I heard it. A tiny crack, like a twig snapping somewhere off trail. Then another. Soft footsteps, slow, measured. Circling. Every instinct in me started screaming to leave. Not panic exactly, but urgency. Pure primal fear. The kind humans are born with. I turned slowly, scanning the woods, and that's when it happened. Something exploded out of the bushes. there's no better word for it, exploded. 1 second the woods were empty. The next there was a full-grown female cougar airborne and flying directly at me with a speed that didn't even seem real. People think big cats move like house cats. They don't. They move like muscle-given intelligence. She hit me so hard it felt like getting tackled by a motorcycle. I went down instantly. No chance to react. My head smashed against the dirt, and before I could even understand what was happening, I felt claws ripping through my shoulder and chest. The pain was immediate and blinding. Not sharp at first. Burning. Like someone dragged red-hot knives across my body. I remember screaming and hearing this horrible snarling sound right in my ear. Deep, wet, animal. The kind of sound that bypasses language and goes straight into your nervous system. Then I remembered something stupid. A random survival video I'd watched online years earlier. Some wildlife expert saying that during a predator attack, you protect your neck and throat at all costs. So purely on instinct, I curled inward and covered my head. That's when I felt her jaws. God. I still have nightmares about that part. She kept trying to bite down on the back of my head. I could feel her teeth scraping my skull through my hair. Every time her jaws snapped shut near my neck, I genuinely thought, this is it. This is where I die. And the terrifying thing was how casual her strength felt. Like I was nothing. Not an opponent. Not a threat. Just meat. I realized very quickly that if I stayed curled up, she was eventually going to get the angle she wanted. I was going to bleed out in the dirt while this thing ate me alive. So I forced myself to move. I rolled onto my back and swung my arm as hard as I could, punching her directly in the face. It did absolutely nothing. She barely even reacted. Then she hit me. One swipe. That's all it took. People think claws slice cleanly like knives in movies. They don't. It felt more like being hit with 5 meat hooks attached to a truck engine. I felt chunks of my face tear open instantly. Warm blood poured into my mouth and eyes. I actually felt pieces of skin hanging loose. The pain hit a second later so violently I nearly blacked out. I threw my hands up without thinking. Big mistake. She clamped onto my left hand and bit down. I heard the crunch before I felt it. 3 fingers gone. Just like that. The pressure of her jaws was unreal. Not biting, crushing, like industrial machinery. I remember screaming so hard my throat tore open while she shook her head side to side. And then suddenly I just broke, mentally. Not physically. Mentally. There's a moment in trauma where your brain accepts death. I can't explain it, unless you felt it yourself. Everything slows down. The panic disappears. You stop thinking about escape and start thinking weird final thoughts. Mine was, Mom's gonna have to identify me. That thought still haunts me more than the attack itself. Because in that moment, I truly believed I was seconds away from dying. I was lying there, shredded open, half blind from blood, missing fingers, staring into the face of this animal while she prepared to finish me. Then somehow, my right hand touched a branch. Pure luck. A thick, broken tree branch lying in the mud beside me. I grabbed it without thinking, and when she lunged again, I shoved it upward with every ounce of strength I had left. The branch went straight into her eye. The cougar shrieked, not roared, shrieked. A horrible, high-pitched screaming sound I still hear in my dreams sometimes. She recoiled instantly, thrashing backward into the dirt. Blood sprayed everywhere. I scrambled away, screaming like an insane person. Just pure animal screaming. Fear and adrenaline and pain all coming out at once, and by some miracle, she backed off. Maybe the eye injury scared her. Maybe my screaming convinced her I wasn't worth it anymore. Maybe she thought I was already dying. I don't know. But she turned and disappeared into the woods. Just like that. Gone. The silence afterward was somehow worse. I remember lying there, shaking uncontrollably, looking at my hand, looking at the blood soaking into the dirt around me. One side of my vision blurry because part of my face was hanging open. And then, survival instinct kicked back in. I got up. To this day, I don't know how. I stumbled back toward the parking lot, half delirious, leaving blood everywhere. The trail felt endless. I kept expecting the cougar to come back at any second. Every shadow looked alive. When I finally reached my car, I almost passed out, trying to unlock it because my hand wouldn't work properly anymore. I drove for maybe 10 minutes before realizing I was fading fast. I barely managed to call 911. After that, things get fragmented. Sirens, paramedics, bright hospital lights, doctors shouting, surgeries. A lot of surgeries. I spent weeks in recovery. Now I wear a prosthetic cover over my left hand. From a distance, people sometimes don't notice right away. Up close, they always do. I've had multiple reconstructive surgeries on my face, but there's only so much doctors can repair when something tears you apart that violently. The scar runs from my cheekbone down across my jawline. Kids stare at it sometimes. Adults try not to. And the weirdest part is this. I don't even hate the cougar. I should, but I don't. She wasn't evil. She wasn't some monster hiding in the woods waiting to murder hikers. She was an apex predator doing what apex predators do. I was in her territory at the wrong time, probably too close to cubs or a hidden kill, or maybe she was starving. Nature doesn't care about fairness. That's the lesson people don't understand. Online, everybody loves romanticizing the wilderness. They talk about reconnecting with nature like nature is some gentle spiritual force. Nature is beautiful, but nature is also brutally indifferent. People online ask me now if I believe in cryptids or monsters or ghosts in the woods after what happened. Skinwalkers, wendigos, all that stuff. Honestly, I don't know anything about that. Maybe those stories are real, maybe they aren't, but I can tell you this firsthand. You do not need monsters lurking in the forest to make the woods terrifying. Mother Nature is already powerful enough. And sometimes, when the woods go quiet, there's a reason. The ruined church in Blackthorn Wood. The first night, Daniel Mercer heard the footsteps just after midnight. He was lying in his tent, wrapped in his sleeping bag, listening to the slow breathing of the woods around him. The fire had died to a red pulse outside. Somewhere beyond the thin nylon wall, branches ticked together in the wind like old bones. Then came the sound. Step, pause. Step, pause. Not the skitter of an animal, not the clumsy rustle of a deer. Footsteps. Daniel held his breath. He had come to Blackthorn Wood to get away from people. No phone signal, no emails, no neighbors, no noise except rain, owls, and the crackle of a campfire. 3 nights alone, that was the plan. A small rebellion against the constant hum of his life. But now someone was outside his tent. Step. Pause. Step. The footsteps circled slowly, pressing through the leaves. Daniel reached for the torch beside him, fingers clumsy with cold. He clicked it on and aimed the beam at the tent wall. A shape stood there. Not clear, not solid. Just a tall, wavering shadow stretched across the fabric. Daniel's heart slammed once against his ribs. "Hello?" he called. The footsteps stopped. For several seconds there was only the wind. Then something leaned close to the tent. So close the fabric bowed inward, as though a face were pressing against it from outside. Daniel scrambled backward, the torch shaking in his hand. The fabric snapped flat. He ripped open the tent flap and shone the light into the trees. Nothing, only wet trunks, ferns, mist low to the ground. He told himself it was a camper, a poacher, a trick of moonlight, anything but what it had felt like. Because what it had felt like was this. Something had found him, and it had wanted him to know. By morning, the fear seemed embarrassing. The woods were gray and damp, smelling of moss and smoke. Daniel found no footprints around the tent, though the ground was soft from rain. No disturbed leaves, no broken twigs. He laughed once quietly, but it sounded forced even to him. He spent the day hiking north along an old deer track, deeper into blackthorn wood. The trees grew older there, twisted and close together, their branches knitting overhead until the daylight turned green. Every so often he had the feeling of being watched, but whenever he turned, there was only forest. Near dusk, he found a clearing beside a narrow stream and made camp again. He built the fire larger than before. That night, he did not sleep. At first there was only the stream, chuckling softly over stones. Then, sometime after midnight, the woods went silent. No insects, no wind, no water. Daniel sat upright. Across the clearing, between two black trees, stood a woman. His breath caught. She was pale. Not white, exactly, but the color of something long drowned. Her dress hung in strips around her, dark with what might have been mud. Her hair fell over her face in thin, wet strands. She stood completely still. Daniel fumbled for his torch. When the beam struck her, it passed through her. Not cleanly, not like glass. More like smoke holding the shape of a body. The torch slipped from his hand. The woman raised one arm. Her finger pointed into the trees. Then her head tilted. Slowly. Too slowly. Daniel heard a sound from her, faint at first. A whisper dragged over the leaves. "Come." He ran. He did not pack. He did not put on his boots properly. He burst from the tent and plunged into the trees, branches whipping his face, roots grabbing at his feet. Behind him came a sound like a woman crying underwater. Then the footsteps began. Step. Pause. Step. But this time they were faster. Daniel ran until his lungs burned. He stumbled through bracken, slid down a muddy bank, and crashed into a hollow beneath an uprooted tree. There he lay in the darkness, hands clamped over his mouth. The footsteps passed above him. The smell that came with them was awful. Wet earth, rotting flowers, old grave soil. Daniel did not move until dawn. When morning came, he found scratches on his arms and blood on his hands. He knew he should leave. The car was south. 2, maybe 3 hours if he kept his head. But the woods looked different. The paths seemed to have shifted in the night. He walked for hours and found only deeper forest. By late afternoon, Daniel saw something hanging from a branch. A strip of gray cloth. He stepped closer. It looked like part of the woman's dress. Then he saw another strip beyond it, and another. They led through the trees. Every instinct told him not to follow. But the sun was sinking. The woods were darkening. And behind him, very faintly, he heard a woman begin to hum. Daniel followed the cloth. The third night came cold. He had no tent now, no food, no map. His torch was nearly dead. He walked until his knees trembled, guided by those strips of cloth fluttering from branches like funeral ribbons. The humming followed him. Sometimes it was far away. Sometimes it was beside his ear. Once he turned and saw the woman between the trees. Only she was different now. Her head hung at a broken angle. Her mouth sagged open wider than any living mouth could. Her eyes, barely visible through the hair, shone like two coins at the bottom of a well. She did not walk. She glided. But the footsteps still came. Step, pause, step, as if some invisible body dragged behind her. Daniel screamed and ran. The forest tore at him. Thorns opened his cheek. Mud sucked at his shoes. The moon appeared and vanished behind the branches, flashing like a blade. Then he saw a stone through the trees. A wall. He staggered toward it, sobbing with relief, and burst into a clearing. There, beneath the moon, stood the ruins of an old church. Its roof was gone. Its windows were empty. Ivy strangled the walls, and the crooked remains of a bell tower leaned over the clearing like a broken neck. Gravestones rose from the grass around it, most of them sunken, their names eaten away by time. Daniel stumbled through the archway, where the doors had once been. Inside, the church was colder than the forest. Moonlight poured through the roofless nave. Ferns grew between cracked flagstones. At the far end, where the altar should have been, there was a pit. Daniel stopped. The smell rolled out of it. Damp stone, mildew, decay. He lifted the dying torch and pointed it down. For a moment, his mind refused to understand what he was seeing. Then the beam steadied. Bones, human bones, a tangle of ribs, a curve of skull, long, pale fingers, half buried in dirt. Not one body, many. Some old and brown with age, others newer, slick with dark soil. Daniel backed away, shaking his head. "No," he whispered. Behind him, at the entrance, the footsteps stopped. Step, pause, silence. Daniel turned. The woman stood beneath the arch. She filled it now. She was taller than before, stretched thin as a shadow at sunset. Her dress writhed as though something underneath it were crawling. Her hair lifted in a wind Daniel could not feel. Then she smiled. It split her face almost in two. Daniel stumbled backward until his heel struck the edge of the pit. Pebbles fell into the dark, clicking against bone. The apparition raised her hand again and pointed, not into the woods this time. Down, into the pit. Daniel understood then. She had not been chasing him away. She had been herding him. The stones beneath him shifted. A hand burst from the soil behind his ankle. Then another. Cold fingers closed around his leg. Daniel screamed and kicked, but the grip tightened. From the pit came a chorus of whispers, dry and eager, all speaking over one another. "Stay. Rest. Join us." The woman drifted closer. With each inch, her face changed. Young, then old. Beautiful, then rotten. Her jaw unhinged. Her eyes sank back into black hollows. Her skin peeled away like wet paper, revealing the grin of something ancient beneath. Daniel clawed at the flagstones, nails breaking, palms bleeding. The hands dragged him to the edge. His torch flickered. In that final burst of light, he saw the wall beside the pit. Words had been scratched into the stone again and again, by fingers, knives, perhaps teeth. She brings them. She brings them. She brings them. The torch died, and in the dark, Daniel felt the woman bend over him. Her lips brushed his ear. "Come," she whispered. The next morning, a ranger found Daniel's abandoned car at the southern edge of Blackthorn Wood. Search parties went in for 3 days. They found his tent first, torn open and soaked with rain. They found his pack a mile farther north. They found strips of gray cloth tied to the branches, though no one could agree what the cloth was made from. It crumbled when touched, leaving a smell like earth from a freshly opened grave. On the 4th day, the search was called off. Blackthorn Wood was too dense, they said. Too dangerous. People got lost there. That was the explanation. A man had gone camping. A man had lost his way. A man had vanished. But sometimes when the weather is cold and the moon is thin, hikers near the old southern trail report hearing footsteps in the trees. Step, pause, step. They say a pale woman stands at the edge of the path, pointing silently into the forest. And those who follow her trail of gray ribbons find the ruined church by morning. Those who run from her reach it by night. But they all reach it. Sooner or later, they all reach the church.